Hey guys, it's Animatrocities, and today I'm going to be doing one of the most requested tutorials I've ever gotten, and that is explosions. A lot of people have been asking how do you do your explosions, how do you do your effects, and I'm sort of here to answer that question. First of all, I want to say I'm not a professional, so anyone who doesn't really know my channel, I just do this for fun right now. I'd like to be a professional, but you need to understand that I'm not a professional at this. This is just how I do my explosions. So we'll just get into it. What I have here are three types of explosions that I call. This is what I call them. This isn't necessarily what they're called in the industry, or yeah, what they're called in the industry. This is just what I call them. A dome explosion is a large explosion that basically is a half circle, and it expands outward and basically annihilates everything. They're used for it's a very large scale explosion. A lot of the times you see this in animes and then animated films. It's to indicate a large explosion, sometimes nuclear. Those are usually the easiest explosions, to be completely honest, because all it really is a half circle that expands outward. A good example of a dome explosion that I've used before is in my End of All Hope map. That explosion would be a dome explosion. Of course, they added some stuff to it, but you know. Next explosion we have is the one stage explosion. For me, one stage explosion just means an explosion that occurs on one layer. Um, Basically, usually not a large explosion. It's usually quite. I wouldn't say. Yeah, it's usually for small, medium explosions. Explosions that don't have a lot of power to them. They just kind of. I don't know. They do their own thing. They're not that dramatic either. I don't really use one stage explosions for dramatics. The explosions I use for drama or dramatics, if even that's a word, is the multi-stage explosion. This is an explosion that occurs on multiple layers. Uh, Basically, these are dramatic explosions. These are explosions that are explosions within themselves, and they just rapidly expand. I can't talk, and they just go everywhere. So this bottom area right here would be debris or a debris cloud coming up from the another like a secondary explosion right here, and the primary explosion is in the back, as indicated as white. It's the brightest color. That's what that's supposed to indicate. I hope I've indicated that. But yeah, multi-stage explosion is what you do when you want to do like a really dramatic explosion that catches the eye and everyone's like, holy shit, shit is going down. That's basically what they're used for, basically what I use them for. In minor scenes and stuff, I don't use multi-stage explosions. They take a lot of time to do. They can be quite complex, and they include a lot of moving parts that um, a lot of people don't want to put in that much effort just because, and I'm not like trying to dog on anyone, it takes a lot of time to do a multi-stage explosion. The explosion I posted on Twitter with the truck took me a course of 4 days of straight animating, probably over 40 hours at least. It just takes that long. There's a lot of planning, there's a lot of just things that go into it. Alright, now moving on. I'm going to try to teach you each of these different explosions. I'm not sure if I'll go into like line arting and glows and stuff like that. That's completely up to you. That's just what I do for my explosions. I'm trying to create a tutorial for you to create your own explosions individual of mine. I don't want to be ripped off, but I also want to be able to inspire people. So that is sort of the purpose of this tutorial. So yeah, we'll get into the one stage explosion is what we're going to work on. This one right here. And that's, it's not like a major explosion. It's like a minor explosion, but yeah, so I'll probably be animating these with just kind of a rough feel to it, but again, that's okay. That's just part of doing it, because like I said, I don't really want to go into line art and stuff like that. That's really up to you. It's based on style and the time you want to take to make explosions. Because I know some of you don't want to sit down and do an explosion for 24 hours. Trust me, that's not. There's a lot of people who don't find that fun. So getting into it, here's sort of like a diagram to show you how an explosion works. Because an explosion is basically pressurized gases being released at incredible speed. Your initial explosion is tiny. It's also very, very bright. I should have done it in yellow, but I did in pink. Don't sue me. But yeah, this initial explosion is very small, and then it rapidly expands outward. And what you see here is the explosion, very jagged. When explosion first starts, it's very jagged, a lot of jagged edges. And then when it starts going outward, as it slows down, it sort of gets all like the characteristic circles. And eventually it sort of like looks like a big round mass with a bunch of different round masses on top of it, if that makes any sense. So basically what you have, I say basically a lot, sorry about that, but you have the explosion expanding outward, and now it's slowed down, and it's just doing this sort of circly derpy thing, and it looks a lot better when you like work on it, but that's just what I have for right now. Okay, so let's get into the actual explosion. I'm gonna delete these frames because we will not need them anymore. If you'd like to go back in the tutorial and look at that, you can. Okay, so initial explosion. I'm not gonna do these in different colors just because, not to save time, but I just kind of, I don't know, it makes it a mess when there's a whole bunch of different colors. It'll be hard for you to see the different details and stuff like that. Okay, so initial explosion, very small. This frame right here is going to appear for exactly 1 frame out of 24 frames, which is how many frames appear in 1 second of animation if you're animating at 24 FPS. 24 FPS stands for 24 frames per second. 1 frame means that this 1 frame plays for 1 frame out of 24 frames in that second of animation. For those of you with Photoshop and GIMP and other programs that aren't necessarily built for animation but can be used for animation, I believe there is a way to time your animations in video editing programs that allow you to make a frame appear for 1 frame out of 24 seconds. But for those with Toon Boom and TV Paint and other animation programs, you already pretty much know how this works. So this initial, we'll call it flash for now, appears for exactly 1 frame out of the 24 frames. So the next frame will also be on 1s because we're gonna do sort of a, I wouldn't say too dramatic, but definitely a medium explosion. Okay, and then the explosion starts rapidly expanding outward. So you're going to see a lot of spikes and yeah, a lot of flashy stuff going on. So it's just expanding outward, and then in this frame we'll start doing the circular edges. Along with the spikes. These circular edges are just to indicate the fact that the explosion is slowing down as it expands. And eventually, after it has gone its course, there won't be all these spikes. These spikes will disappear. So you don't have to worry about continually drawing these spikes. If you do that, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to remember that an explosion is not, it's not characteristic to be spiky the entire time, so slowly these spikes fade away and turn into more circular masses, as indicated by this. They look more like this, and yeah, so they look like that. That's kind of what it's going to look like in the end. So anyways, back to the explosion. Yeah, so this explodes outward. The next, I usually have my first 3 frames of the explosion are on ones. That's to indicate just the speed, and it's also a nice, I don't know, it's just the way I like to animate the explosion. At this point, your spiky parts of the explosion start to get less spiky, I guess we'll say. And it starts to turn into this sort of circular mass, which is still expanding outward. So, I mean, the speed is still there. It's just, it's not as dramatic at this point. And another thing to add is explosions don't really have keyframes. The reason I say this is because it's actually better to animate a explosion or a lot of effects straight ahead, which this means is there's not really much planning that has to be done. You just animate straight ahead, and it's sort of like an easy. I don't know. It's a much easier process than having keyframes and all that jargon for effects animation, at least. But yeah, so the explosion is dying down, and I think what I'm going to do is have it expand out for a couple more frames. And you can see the spiky parts are rapidly dissipating because there is no, because the explosion has reached its max point, so it's not as intense as it was previously. And the explosion is going to peak out the top, so sorry about that. And I will play it when I get to that point. So yeah, we will get to that in a bit. Sorry I'm not talking. I might, no. I was going to speed this up, but I figured it's better to like have you guys watch me draw it. Just because it's more hands-on in my opinion. But yeah, there is your explosion, and we'll play it in a sec. Okay, and then we'll, like that last frame, we'll play it for, it'll appear for 3 frames instead. So now we'll doom this back, and we'll play it. As you can see, that flash appears for that amount of time, very doesn't appear for long, and then the explosion just rapidly expands outward. I usually don't do small flashes like that. I usually do really, really big flashes and then have it just go all over the place. And that helps me a lot. The next thing we're going to go into is adding details to the explosion itself. This is a little bit difficult because there's different ways to do this. I used to do it where I would draw like these sharp angles like this, like not angles, but just have like things like this. I don't really know what to call them. I'll call them waves for now, but yeah, I used to draw waves. And after studying some of like Japanese anime and even some of the traditional Western animation, I found that it looks really, really, really cartoony, and I don't really like doing it. Instead, I've gotten used to, and this will take practice. This isn't necessarily an easy process, but I've gotten used to drawing complete circles. So there'll be these spiky areas, or not spiky, but these circular areas around the explosion, and yeah, so I'm just gonna draw those. Again, this takes a lot of practice, just because of the fact you gotta make sure every circle is consistent. Yeah, and so the explosion comes outward. You got to make sure you're consistent with the circles. Just make sure they're doing their thing, I guess you could say. I'm not really gonna like go through all those, but yeah, if you just keep doing that and keep it consistent with the explosion, um, it looks really nice. Basically, almost like drawing puffy clouds. If I do this really fast, yeah, if I do this really fast, then okay, I'll just do that. Yeah, so sorry, this is really fast, but um, it's just because I don't want this tutorial going on for 40 minutes, which is what the last one did. I tried to do this tutorial one time and it went to 40 minutes, which is hard to upload. So, um, yeah, you just yeah. So there's that explosion. This is like I said, a one stage explosion, so it's kind of minor. They're not really big explosions. They just I don't really know. Like they're not. I wouldn't say they're used in very dramatic scenes. Just sort of like maybe a war scene, and explosion goes off from a tank or something like that. Like this would be the kind of explosion that, say there was a tank behind this explosion, like tank fires and the smoke expands in front of it. That's sort of what this is for. Um, and that, so since it's, I don't know, I don't really do explosions like that. I tend to do multi-stage explosions just because I have a lot of dramatic shots. But yeah, that is what your one-stage explosion looks like. So take a gander, and then we'll get into the dome explosions. Again, that's another really simple, um, really simple explosion to do. All right, so basically, here is line. No, actually, hold on. Here's the dome, half circle, and then it suddenly expands. Again, doing the same thing. First 3 frames on ones, and it really it really depends how long you want the explosion to play out. Some of my scenes have really long um, explosions where it's just like happening over and over and over again, and they play for a while. And then other explosions, just they're not that long. They're short. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much the gist. And then this dome explosion is just, the dome that expands rapidly outward. And I'm sorry, I'm drawing so crappy right now, but yeah. So if we play that, wow, that last line was really bad. If we play that, you get this. So if you take a lot more time, add some explosions in front or like debris clouds, stuff like that. It can look really, really nice. It actually looks okay-ish, I guess. But yeah. All right, next one, and this is my favorite one. This is the multi-stage explosion. We're gonna have to pull this back a little bit if it lets me. All right, there we go. Yeah, this is the multi-stage explosion. So we're gonna start off. Our first thing is probably gonna be with a spiky explosion right down there. This explosion is going to occur on multiple layers, just to let you know. So, yeah. Again, doing the first 3 frames appear on that layer, and then the real fun begins. Well, I mean, not necessarily real fun, but you get the point. But you also have to remember, explosions, they take time. It's gonna take you a couple, like when you first start off trying to do them, it's gonna take you a couple times where you're like, this really looks bad. I'm not happy with it, and really that's just part of growing. My my first explosions, they were bad, and that's putting it nicely. They were not much movement, not much exaggeration, uh, really poor timing. Um, but yeah, like these explosions are gonna take you time, and I hope this tutorial helps you in any way it can. If it doesn't, sorry about that. I'm like a crappy tutorial maker, so I just do this for fun to help people. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm not like Finch who does pretty good tutorials, to be completely honest. I've watched a couple of her Photoshop tutorials, but wow, talking about other tutorials inside a tutorial. It's tutorialception, guys. I'm a nerd. Yeah, so gonna be silent for a bit. I'm just gonna keep drawing these circles and the explosion. Again, another thing is you gotta get used to drawing these circles. Normally, I would take time to like properly place them, but because this is just a tutorial, I think you guys get the gist of what's going on. So that's sort of why I didn't really. I mean, again, these are just circles. So imagine this, and then you just like take a part out. It's like drawing water, like really crappy water. You just take a part out, and ta-da! There you go. So, yep. This is only going to be a two-stage well, it's going to be a multi-stage explosion. Multi-stage just means more than one. But yeah, there's going to be an explosion that comes up behind it, and it's going to be dramatic. So, yep. Okay. I think that's enough frames. Okay, so let's play that. Looking good. All right. So that's just the first layer, and then the second layer is going to go behind it, and it's going to appear about right here, and we'll just do that in green. Again, drawing those really spiky, yeah, it starts out really spiky, and then the round circles start to appear. It also really helps, and I know I keep sort of reiterating what I'm saying. That's sort of part of animation is reiterating, but uh, it also helps to like really study uh, Japanese animation, Western animation, like just to study like how they do certain things. Um, Helps to look at references too. Nothing wrong about referencing anything, to be honest. The only thing that I would say with referencing is like don't like actually draw the explosion you're seeing. Just kind of like um, use it as a point for which to base the animation off of. Just don't, you know, take it and be like, haha, well, I'm just gonna do exactly what Anima told me not to do. Haha. But I mean, whatever. I don't really care. It's up to you. Sorry, I'm a bad rambler. That's why I shouldn't be doing tutorials. This tutorial probably sucks, but whatever. Yeah, and if you see these things I'm adding right now, these are just like um, debris and stuff that's like shooting off uh, to the side. I'm not sure how that's gonna look, but you know, whatever. I usually do the rough first, and then I'll worry about what certain stuff looks like. Okay. So I could have done better on those little things that like spiral off to the side, but you get the gist. An explosion that occurs on multiple layers and dramatic. Usually I would add a screen shake effect to this, and I don't know, it just gives it like makes it really dramatic, like shakes the whole screen. It makes the explosion feel more alive, like it's actually there in your face. Um, And I'd say that about wraps up the tutorial. There's not really else to really talk about. There is like debris and stuff, and that's pretty simple. I'll do that really quick. Debris is just pieces and stuff that like get thrown out of the explosion. So we're gonna do blue. So like this is a thing, and that's a thing, and they just get thrown out of the explosion. And the way debris works is it gets thrown out really fast, and then like the explosion, eventually it slows down. Um, so eventually all the stuff starts falling back to the ground. Though I gotta make sure I don't accidentally put stuff where it shouldn't be. And then eventually, like if you animate far enough, or the explosion appears for a certain amount of time, where it's like a long sequence, then eventually the debris will actually fall to the ground. But I'm not gonna get that far. So, yep, there you go. That's debris. So, yep. Uh, I will usually I take a lot more time on an explosion like this. This is very like just done for the tutorial. So sorry if it's not like the quality explosion you were looking for, but I hope this gives you enough guidance to be able to animate your own explosions. So with that, I will see you all later.